of the way, I actually think this looks quite a bit more bullish, and we can kind of see it from this structure why I think it is. And once I kind of show the 4-hour 500, that'll make things a little bit more simple. So just to kind of go over what I want to see real quick, and then I'll go more into it, and I'll just recap. But I think this will be a 5-10 minute video because I don't think there's really too much. And then let's just kind of get this out of the way so I don't have to look at this anymore. So what we can see is we have the 4-hour 500 right here, and then we have the 1 hour right here. And so you can see why we had some of this pressure coming in, especially when like we just needed a drop in the morning. And then so anyway, so let's just show this, and then we have the 4-hour right here. And so what we can kind of see from this perspective is that we finally more or less have closed some of these gaps, and this does look nice for what it is. Now let me get rid of this because we don't need this anymore. Um, and it looks fairly nice for what it is. I quite like this actually. It looks like we have the lower high, nice kind of base, however you want to call this, whatever. I mean, it looks nice to try to strike up. Now, so let's just kind of say this. Hopefully, we actually start somewhat close. And I'm hoping, essentially, most of this for me is based on this 4-hour right here, the 4-hour 500. So we can just kind of get rid of this. I don't think it's too. I'll put it out back later. So for me, most of it's this, and it will really come down to, in my opinion, I'm not really too worried about the downwards trend line, but I still think it's of some importance. So essentially, we start here. This is pretty bad. If we start here, this is pretty good. We'll see. Maybe we start here. If we do start here, I hope that we come back down. That would make it look the best. And then I'll kind of show you why I keep saying this stuff and what we had today happen today. So I do think starting as close as possible. This has been a very good average for this whole time. And now that we're kind of forming what we have here, we can see this kind of wedge. And so I think if we start here, we do have a decent chance to push up. Now, hopefully, just for the rest of this stuff, I would like to just see a week that also starts here. So in the same perspective, I think there's still, because we keep starting these last 2 weeks under, above, we push down, we start under. And so we have this kind of inherent pressure or weakness to this. So at the end of the day, I would like just to hold the week in this area at least. So we can just kind of come down here and then push up. That would be really great next week. Um, and I'm kind of hoping that, so I don't expect us to really move too much. And I think we'll have a really bullish week next week if that's possible, but something bad always seems to happen. So let's kind of just go to and check what we're looking at today. Or I'll say it this way, good, a little bit better, but I'd still like if it came down, but still plays the top side, which is really nice. And pretty bad. This is arguably worse. We'd have to check to the 30 minutes here, and I can get into this a little bit more, and it'll make a little bit more sense. But we don't want to start too high. We don't want to start too low. Starting too high, a lot of the times it just seems to get pushed up. Starts too low, it gets pushed up before we come down instead of coming back. And when we start too low, we just push up, which it's like we're just oversold. Like this, like we'll just. So if it's easier to see on like the 4-hour, when we check this, so we can see we ended here, right? So when we start the next day, we should be starting somewhere up here. This is pretty bad. Somewhere around here is pretty bad too. There's only so much room to really push up and test. It pushes all the way down here in pre-market, especially in the last couple hours coming up to it. And this is really the same exact thing, right? It's practically like the same exact thing. And then we push down in pre-market. We're like up here and we push down in pre-market. We're oversold and we push up and strike these places. So just getting into it quick, let's just go over some of the stuff because we can already kind of see where we are and what we want, which is pretty standard. And the same thing for Bitcoin. I'll take a look at that a little bit later. So let's kind of look into see what we did for the day. So for the day, we had this 4-hour under us, which we can see just extending more or less the line to this area. It's pretty good average through where we are. So we decide, hey, let's start up here, which is fine. And we can push up. That's fine. But we can't push up that much. And we really should, if we want to continue up, we should touch back down, not just for the gap, but just to come back to resistance. Like, I mean, it like the gap is where resistance is more or less, but like it's not always that way, but everybody wins. You come back to support. I'm sorry, you come back to support, and you also gap back down. Support resistance. It's all the same thing. It just depends which side of it you're on. So we push way too high up, and then we come down. We don't touch the 1 hour, so it's no surprise that we kind of push through this. We come under the 4 hour. You know, we just have so much resistance under us, and then we come into these areas, and this is kind of where it comes into play with the. Can I go back all the way? Let me see. Sorry about the eyes. We have text here. One second. Okay. And then we can kind of see it through here. So it's a little bit easier to see through eyes here. So this is about where the 1 hour kind of kicks in. So our 1 hour 375 holes here. So we can see that we finally push under and then we start under ugly, ugly. And it's just kind of this pervasive thing that's been pushing against us. But we're looking for regaining this area. We do see we come back. This is a really ugly start, pushes up. It's not really that strong, but I'm not surprised that this pushed up. But this for me wasn't, this was more of just a feeling that I got and the idea that um, I don't know why it stopped here, but like there, I don't want to explain it specifically because it's weird and it wasn't a specific TA thing. I generally think this is horrible and stuff like this should always turn around down here. It's just like this, like we had right here, as opposed to trying to push through here. So the biggest issue of why we didn't come down today was that they just couldn't, in my opinion, they couldn't get it to end the 30 under here. So if we were just able to do that, we'd come into this area, and this is already weak since we've arguably used this. It's not exactly a hit. We've already arguably used this in a huge gap. Like if we look at the space here, there's almost nothing here with this last push up, and there's very little support here also as well. Also an open area all right here. So it's just a very weak open area. But there's not really much that you can do when if your entry signal is we start a 30-minute under and it just doesn't start under, then there's nothing you can really do. Or if you start under, there's nothing you can really do because if it doesn't start under, well then for me on the 30-minute, I want another 30. I'm waiting another 30 minutes, and you can check the streams and stuff, and that's how I go about this stuff. Um, if I see a certain time frame, I generally want to see something based on that certain time frame. And it's the same reason with the 1 hour. I wanted to see on the 1 hour why I don't care what it does here. The farther we push up is an overextension. We need to switch over this 1 hour somewhere around here. And we switch over right at the same value. It might say it says 151. It should be the same regardless. I don't know if this might have adjusted before or after, depending on one of these closes, but this started at the same exact price where this was. I think it was 150, 152. Yeah, the open 150, 152. Yeah, so it never changed after the close. So we can kind of see that there. So it's just like I say in the stream, I wouldn't be surprised if we end here, but this is a really strong place for it because this gives it a nice structure, even though it was one of the ugliest freaking ways I ever could have seen it. It gives us actually some sort of nice structure without a huge amount of gaps. And now when we play on this side, we filled this area and here we filled here too. So we could, I don't like, I mean, these are wicks. I don't need a candle base all the way down here, but this looks very strong as a base. Even though we have this up here, it looks very strong as a base. So we might need a little bit more time, and it might take until next week. We still have the 3 more days, though, so it's kind of hard to see that. So who knows? They could leave it till next week. Other stuff could happen. But regardless, this 151 current, this line at 151.75 to me is a very important level. I would like to see it start above it, and I think it's relatively a strong position because it's an average. So if you're playing the top side of an average, if you push off from the average, it's like the safest place that you can possibly be. And if you're going to see reversal under it, usually you're going to see it average. It's usually not going to just start above and then rip right through to the other side and then continue to move. It's an average. Usually you need to see some sort of rejection or price action underneath it to push away from it. That's why it's nice for these lines, because when you take a position, if it like starts above on something, it usually doesn't just, depending on what's going on, like if it just comes up, it doesn't usually just come right back down through. Usually it'll come back down. If it pushes too far, usually come up just to test and make sure for confirmation, and that gives you a chance to get out these places and blah, 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 blah. Okay, so that's pretty much that. NASDAQ pretty much moved with it throughout the day, so there's not really any reason to go into any of these. They all looked ugly. They're just moving off of Apple. For what it is. And just to kind of show again, Apple has average over the last 10 days, almost 100 million shares traded. This is the average. If we had a little bit higher today, we actually probably would have a higher average here. At an average of 150 bucks, that's quite a bit. I think it's like 15 billion on average of Apple traded today. Now, if it's a higher price, that probably pushes it up. If we're at like 154 for most of the day, that should be over, I believe, 15 billion. So that's quite a bit being thrown back and forth. So we can just check on the DXY. This is kind of another thing we saw in the short term. Not really too much to see here. I started looking at it, and it kind of is what it is. I don't know what the heck it's doing here. This is its range. I don't know what the heck it's doing. I think a lot of times it moves in the market. Maybe it's just waiting for direction. I'm going to be honest. The market could really go either way. I think depending on where we start, above 150, 175, above it or under it, closer preferably to the actual level as possible. Like I said, we don't want to start all the way down here and have space that's saying, oh, we want to come back and test. And then, that creates a whole trend in itself that could lead to trying to push up and fighting above it. So, if we just start right here, there's not a lot of ambiguity. We start the day pushing down with full force, and if it comes back, it comes back. But that's like a separate thing. So it's just an easier way to see it. As we can see, it's like the 15 up top, the 30 that we kind of push through. Nothing really beautiful here, but I don't want to get too much into it. It doesn't really seem like there's too much from the dollar just doing what it's doing. VIX is still up in space. 32.59 is really what it is. And then let's see. Let's just go to Bitcoin and get this out of the way. So for Bitcoin, it's kind of in between also. So we didn't. So just leaving off where we were yesterday, we had a really nice bounce here. And if we saw it, and remember in the other video I was talking about 19,090, if we switch over here, and it's mainly the trend line, breaking the trend line is what's going to push us all the way down here to hit. If we do, well, we didn't. We switched over here well above. We maintained the trend line. As you can see right here, nice bounce. We switched, boom. This is when the market ended. This was the new day. So we didn't end all the way down here. And so it makes sense more or less that we would push up before we push down, because the main factor we were expecting, if we want to re-engage with this level right here, is it falling through this trend line. So it doesn't switch over on the new day to engage that trend line. Why would it go down? There's not really a reason. Now, did it need to go up that far? No, but that's not how I look at things. Like, oh, it needs to go up this far. I just look at it. This is our range. This is what to expect. This is where we can expect it. What's more likely to happen? And generally, what's more likely to happen is what happens, because it's just the path of least resistance. You could have a lot of puts or calls in one direction, and people could say it's like stop loss hunting and stuff like that. Well, actually, at the same time, that's just the path of least resistance. Weak hands are the path of least resistance. So, so let's see. So let's just kind of go here. We can it pushes up. We can kind of see on the 2-hour little thing that was kind of note that were sketchy. Market opened between here, these 2 hours right here is between 8 and 10. It was kind of interesting that we didn't come all the way up to this spot. So it was showing a little bit of weakness already in what it was doing. I don't know if it had anything on the short term. I'll click it here. I honestly don't really even care to check, but we can just check a little bit in itself. Bounce down, bounce down. Yeah, and we could kind of see, so it's 11:30. Yeah, so we have 11:30 switch over right here. Yeah, so we can just see kind of what it's doing around here. I think this line's supposed to be a little bit lower. I almost don't care. Let's see. Okay, it looks like it's supposed to be somewhere around there, so we can just kind of check it from this perspective. Yeah, so around the same kind of thing. It's just reflective of the market, so it doesn't really matter. And so we're all the way up here. We don't have any really good support. We have like a 2-hour 200 here, but the 2 hours here, the 4 hours all the way back down, everything we just pushed from. So if we see where we're bouncing and just kind of finding support at, we come under the 2. We have the 2 here, but it also joins up with the 4. And that kind of gets us to where we are right now. So if the market looks good, I'd still rather see something like up here and expect it to maybe possibly push back up. Otherwise, we still have our target on the day down here, which I think should be another 115 under. So to like on the 8-hour today, it should be at 18,474. But I don't really see a reason for it to come under until we have a 4-hour that starts under this, and then we should come down to try to get to it. So it's down there, but I don't see a reason for us to turn around. The market's kind of in between. And we'll probably end up, I think, blowing through it if the market does turn bad tomorrow, because things could get really ugly. But right now, I don't see any reason for it to go down. I also, at the same time, though, I don't see any reason for this to go up. I don't think there's going to be any kind of great signal from the VIX or the dollar. It's possible, but we're not going to see the VIX till 3 a.m. in the morning. So that's kind of that. And then, yeah, so I don't really think it's worth it to really mess with Bitcoin right now. I think it's just going to be more or less stuck in this range, and then it's going to be waiting for direction from the market. And the market determines everything pretty much. So this is just doing what it's doing because there's less of a reason for this to go down, because it needs to break through this. Whether it was going to go up this much, if you told me it was going to go up this much, I'd probably say no. I probably would have said if it was going to go up, we'd probably go up here, more or less. Otherwise, I'd probably say just some obvious spots. We could just do something here. So I really think it overshot by quite a bit. I think this looks pretty decent for it to go back up to. This is what I would have said. And if if I had to give a bullish place, I would say up here. So it is very odd that we did kind of come halfway in between these things. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me whatsoever at all. But I think it's fine for now. I don't think there's really a big issue until the market opens. So to look at Bitcoin, trying to figure out what Bitcoin's going to do, why? There's only so much of a reason to when the market, when it's the weekday, because it just does what it just looks for scraps in between the market. So, or it takes whatever signal it has with the market. So, yesterday we also had a chance to be pretty positive as well. We ended off in a okay place. I was saying like some of the places that we could start were pretty decent. So, the sentiment was kind of in between. So if there's nothing really bearish or really bullish, it's going to kind of take what it can take. Even though I think this is way more than what it needed to take, but this also could be. I've seen a lot of people say like 16K, 17K, we're going down to. So this probably wasn't a lot of buying. This probably was a lot of, well, this is probably a lot of liquidations, more or less, is what I think this was. Do I care? No, I don't care. That's people's faults for that. And I think that's pretty much about it. I guess I could go. I don't think there's anything to really look at with these. I think Ethereum to Bitcoin looks pretty decent where it is right now. I definitely think it looks like it has some nice legs. I do like how this is averaging and this started above here for today. We did push all the way down, which is nice. So maybe we can start up here again and try to push a little bit more. It does have a little bit, more or less, let's just look at it like this. This is the simple way to do it. So if we do push up, we have this here. This is our next range. This is our kind of next expected range. So it looks a lot better to try to fight for something that's like 6% or maybe like 5% than it does for here. But this could be a decent base for what it is worth. I do think since this is kind of more the base, it has a better chance than some of these areas up here. But at the same time, it's the amount to gain is a lot less. So waiting for price action here is probably better than playing this as opposed to picking it up here. But I don't think it's too bad to pick it up where it is. It's just you put your hands in everything, and it depends on what the market does. With Bitcoin doing what it does, I imagine most things don't look like this. Like Doge should have gotten pretty wrecked. Just checking Doge again, came all the way down 307. 312 is what I was saying. I thought it was going to come down to, regardless of any of this stuff happening. It always makes it a lot worse when Bitcoin does this because stuff gets wrecked out a lot more. Then we can go to Ripple. I don't even know what Ripple looks like. I don't think I looked at it today. Should be wrecked too. Yeah, and Ripple got wrecked. So, yeah, I talked about this. We have the 12-hour here, so we ended up having, we can just raise this up to like here, have it actually on the average. So we can see this. It tried to do its thing. It got wrecked back down. This is what I talk about. It's really tough, really, when it comes to these things. So did I necessarily, well, when we have ends like this, it's not surprising. It's one of those things. I don't want to act like, oh, I said it was going to go down, yeah, so it got wrecked and it went down. I don't really want to say that because a lot of this is really just the dangers of Bitcoin shooting up and then shooting down because you get wrecked. I mean, it already looked bad anyway. We wanted to see something above here to engage into this range. But the big issue with these things is that you just get shreked with that Bitcoin value when Bitcoin shoots up. Actually, does it even get shreked with Bitcoin? Huh, this actually might have been a little bit of a deviation. Let me see this real quick. I don't know if I have enough time to kind of go through it. Because wasn't it yesterday that Bitcoin super shot up? Or is today the 27th? Yeah, today's the 27th. That's super interesting. This actually didn't get wrecked as so this got wrecked, which I wasn't too surprised, but this actually isn't as much of an impact based off of Bitcoin as what I would have thought. We switched over on the day and it only went down from, I mean, it's 2317 to 2278, like 2%, 3%. That's not that bad. This actually held up pretty well, but usually as a general rule of thumb for these things, they will get wrecked pretty hard on their USD value when that happens. I guess Doge relatively is in the same place too. It got rattled up, and it does mess these things up quite a bit. But it wasn't as bad as what I would have thought. Because like the last thing I'll say is the idea is that you're in Doge to Bitcoin. Well, if Bitcoin's shooting up, no one wants to be in Doge, no one wants to be in Ripple. We want to be in Bitcoin, right? Obviously, because the snowball effect and everything else. But then when Bitcoin goes down, that just affects the USD price, which is then gonna if the BTC pair stays in parity and it doesn't change, it's gonna not parity, but it stays where it was before. It doesn't change. You're just gonna lose USD value, right? So generally, you're gonna lose both. Anyway, I just kind of want to go over that. So I hope that was helpful, you all. I'll see you guys tomorrow at 9:15. Take care.